Hi everyone, welcome to the very first episode of the TwinsUK podcast. I'm your host Arati and I'm here with my co-host Max.
Yeah, hi everyone, twins, nerds, and the scientifically curious. We're so excited to bring you this new podcast from TwinsUK.
Yeah, so if you're new to TwinsUK, welcome aboard. We're the UK's largest adult twin registry, a specialised database that collects information on identical and non-identical twins. This allows us to study how genes, lifestyle and the environment shape health and ageing. Think of us as part detective, part scientist, uncovering the fascinating ways our bodies work. Through this podcast, we'll be bringing you the latest news, exciting research, and a behind-the-scenes look at what's happening in our department.
Yeah, basically just what the bloody hell's going on.
Good question. Let's get stuck in. So what's on the agenda for our very first episode, Max?
So we'll be diving into some of the latest research updates, which includes a sensational new paper published in Nature Genetics, although I might be a little bit biased in this regard because I am actually one of the accredited authors. Plus we'll also be recapping some recent events, including our winter party.
Sounds like a great lineup. Let's get started.
Okay, let's kick off with our very first news bulletin. Arati, what are some of the biggest and brightest updates for us on this gorgeous spring afternoon?
Yeah, so one of the most exciting projects that has launched recently is a project called TwiNclusion, which makes it easier than ever for our long-term participants to take part in research, but from the comfort of their own home. Some of our incredible twins have been involved for 20 or even 30 years, and we couldn't do this without you. Your contributions truly make a difference.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic step forward for twinkind. We also have many ongoing and prospective studies which are supported by our routine clinical visits, where twins will come in every 4 years to provide samples and take part in a variety of health measurements, and this will allow us to track their long-term health.
Yeah, and now on to other news. Award season isn't just for the Oscars. One of our researchers, Fran, and her team have been nominated for the Versus Arthritis Research Highlight of the Year award. This nomination celebrates their amazing work in understanding arthritis. Now, there may not be a red carpet or an emotional Oscar-style speech, but if there was, we'd be front row cheering them on, so we're wishing them the best of luck with that.
Yeah, a really, really exciting milestone, and as mentioned before, we have our new research study that's just been published in Nature Genetics, which looks at some of the minute differences in our genes and how those can influence our levels of cholesterol, blood sugar levels, cardiovascular health, and overall this should hopefully help us understand why some people are more at risk for certain diseases and may lead to better treatment in the future.
Yep, that's an incredible accomplishment. And speaking of big milestones, we've just hit an exciting one for the ADDI Pro Plus biopsy study. Our very first twin pair has participated. This study is diving deep literally into how fat tissue, especially from the belly area, impacts health and aging. By collecting small fat samples, researchers can analyse how it affects inflammation, metabolism, and the risk of diseases like diabetes and heart disease. It's a big step forward in understanding how fat functions beyond just weight. We caught up with the twins after their visit and they described the biopsy as easy, painless, and most importantly, worth it for the sake of advancing research. So a huge thank you to them for taking part. We really appreciate them being the first pair.
Definitely, yeah. And lastly, we did have our winter party recently where everyone got a chance to show off their bowling skills while gossiping over fried chicken, and I was wondering how your technique was coming along, Arati.
Well, to be honest, it wasn't a great start, but one of our colleagues did show me a secret technique.
Nice.
And I got a strike on the first go after that, which was amazing, but I think that was just a one-off.
Yeah, downhill from that point.
How did you find it? I feel like you were there for the chicken.
Yes, I had my priorities set elsewhere, but it was nice to see everyone having a good time, having lots of fun. But yeah, I was probably more interested in the food than embarrassing myself.
Good though,
Yeah.
Now let's dive into today's science discussion. Max, what paper are we talking about today?
So almost as though Cupid decreed it himself, this month we were gifted a Valentine's Day treat with a paper led by Sarah Brotman and colleagues here at TwinsUK. It was published in Nature Genetics and revealed a deep genetic romance between our hearts and our love handles. Although just like all sordid love affairs, the results proved that the delicate dance of our fat genetics can sometimes end in heartbreak.
That sounds a little dramatic. I hope our twins weren't hurt.
Well, some people would have preferred chocolates or flowers, but here it's our job to serve up scientific discoveries for the twins community, and it doesn't get any more delicious than the largest study to date on fat tissue genetics in humans, which included over 2,000 samples, many of which were the twins. But this was no mean feat, as extracting the fat tissue itself requires quite an invasive punch biopsy, which you mentioned earlier, which uses a stainless steel apple corer to actually bore into the skin and connective tissue to try and get through to all that fatty goodness.
Wow, that sounds like a really fitting analogy for these twins and their sacrifices, because they really are at the core of our research. But fat gets a bad rep, but what does it do?
So despite what Gillian McKeith would have you believe, fat is actually really important. Beyond storing a physical memory of all our misguided late-night kebab and pizza decisions, it actually comprises quite a dynamic tissue that helps regulate the molecules vital for our metabolism and also our immune function, which sometimes, if they become dysregulated, can cause a series of complications.
Interesting. So is all fat the same?
Not quite. So we've got two main different types of fat in the body. We have the subcutaneous fat, which is what we looked at here, and that's the type of fat that's found just beneath the skin, and that really is important for our metabolism and helps regulate things like our insulin levels. Although there is another type of fat called visceral fat, and this envelops our fatty organs, our visceral organs, just like a little fleece. And while that sounds cozy, it actually represents a ticking inflammatory time bomb. And it's been shown in the literature that actually this can increase your risk of diabetes and heart disease. So we want to try and minimise the amount of visceral fat as much as possible.
Yeah, so what about the results as well?
Yeah, so getting to the results and getting to the meat of the paper, we actually uncovered 35,000 genetic signals which were shown to control the activity of genes. And this is actually over double what was originally found, and that is partly due to the fact we had so many more people to do the study on. But what was surprising about the paper is that actually a lot of these signals were not found in the genes themselves, but in the regions of the genome just outside the genes. And these actually act as little switches, little control switches, which turn either the activity of the genes up or down. And this often happens in response to environmental changes. And by looking at these signals in previous published studies, we were able to pinpoint 1,800 genes where these small changes in the DNA sequences was actually linked to differences in traits such as your cholesterol levels, body fat distribution, blood pressure, blood sugar, and also risk for diabetes and heart disease.
Interesting. So why do the results matter?
So I think beyond this just being interesting from a scientific point of view, and the fact that it kind of confirms what's been the kind of growing consensus in the field in how our genes regulate the function of our fat tissue and our risk of disease. It will also help us use this information better to hopefully predict and prevent diseases related to our fat in the future, and also opens the door for further investigation into how these things might differ between men and women or other groups in society. And fortunately for those who are curious, this information has been collated into a metabolic goldmine now, which is publicly available for other scientists to make use of.
Amazing. So what did we learn today?
So I think what we've learned is that our clingy love handles and their relationship with our hearts is messier than a Shakespearean tragedy. And just like all toxic relationships, this one could threaten to ruin us. But thanks to our volunteers at TwinsUK, we're starting to rewrite that love story, and hopefully we can build a better relationship with our fat in the future.
Amazing.
So, we're going to give you a behind-the-scenes peek at what happens when a twin comes to visit, starting with something super important, consent. Olea, what's the very first thing that happens when someone walks in?
Thanks for your question, Adna. First thing first, we want to make sure that you understand what consent is and why your samples and data are being used and what information you will receive.
And why is that so important?
Because no one should be taking part in research without knowing exactly what it's being used for. Saying yes is always a choice.
And can someone change their mind later on?
Absolutely. Anytime, consent can be changed and withdrawn, no questions asked.
So it's all about trust and respect?
Exactly.
That's a wrap on episode 1. We'll see you next time. Bye!